Alright, what is up YouTube? It's Cordless, Cord Campbell. Boy, I'm telling you, last stream, I was still thinking about that the other day. I was like, wow, that was brutal. Well, it's good news. Everything is okay. Nobody died. And I'm going to show you something cool. This is cool too. If I remember to talk about this, this is pretty cool, but I got to log in real quick. So I'm logging into the production site. So this is all in prod. This has all been pushed. That does not mean it's not going to break. But this should all be working. So that means if you're watching this and you want to use this, just go use it. It's mitta.us. Alright, so I'm going to log in. I've given Mitta my phone number, so it texts me to log in. But if you come in the first time and you just give it your email address, it'll send you a token to log in, and then you'll come right where I'm at right here. If you want, for whatever reason, you want to give it your phone number, you can go back to the main page and click on this sign up button right here, and then it should ask you for your phone number at some point. That's how it works. So basically, if you pay for it, it's going to ask for your phone number, and then eventually I'll add a little bit more authentication stuff to it, but there's no passwords. I just got rid of passwords. They're ridiculous. Passwords are ridiculous. So we're logged in here. I mean, you're bookmarking things with this. I keep saying that, but if anybody ever watches this and says, "Oh, you're a bookmarking site, I'm going to sue you because I have patents for it," well, the problem with your approach is that it's a database. It's a search engine. And there are web pages on the internet, and like there are patents for putting search pages in search engines, but I'm not doing like anybody else is doing it. So, and I mean, if you want, you could call Google a search engine or a bookmarking site because they're a search engine too. So it works the exact same way as Google. I don't work any differently than Google. So if people want to think about it as bookmarks, well, that's their problem or your problem. But as far as it being a thing that it's been around before, there's not really much like it. It's a search engine, and it uses Solr, and that's about it. I mean, it just allows people to use Solr. So there's a lot of things you can do with a database. You can build all sorts of applications with it. So this is designed to be sort of like, I don't know, useful in a multiple ways. And so, like, without further ado, I'm going to show you what I've done. So we'll do it to Google. We might as well do it to Google because they're okay with that. We're using them to do this, so we're paying them to do what we're doing. So what it did is it went out and it grabbed the title and the description from news.google.com. So what that grub command is it's a command that says, hey, go index this site. So it did that, and it texted it on my phone too. I just temporarily have it texting it to my phone whenever I image the site. I just got this thing working where you click on this image, and then it pops up this little pop-up box. Whenever you do a startup, if you're thinking about doing a startup, I mean, you should my suggestion is if you don't know what you're doing, you should get an attorney and go and talk to them about trademarks, patents, intellectual property, basically. That could be the same attorney, it could be a different attorney. Trademarks and basically whatever's copyright to you, like your name and things like that. You can have trademarks on them. You can have registered trademarks as well. So I suggest that you talk to an attorney about that stuff. But in my experience has been that it takes a lot of, when you're doing something new, you're usually going to run into something that someone else has tried to patent. The trademark stuff is like for your name and stuff like that. So if you use a name or whatever that is somebody else's name, then there could be trademark issue. But in the case of patents, like both of those are sort of intellectual property. It's like property owned by the company that you're creating. But then you gotta think about, well, are we gonna do something that's gonna get somebody to pay attention to us? And the only reason I ever think about this is because when I did Zoto, which is a photo sharing site, there was a company who claimed that they had the intellectual property to like a photo sharing site. And so they went around and they sued like Flickr, and they were extorting money. And it was basically a bunch of patent trolls down in Texas were doing it. So I always suggest to people when they're thinking about doing a startup is they think through those things, because that's like a thing that can come and kill the company later if you're not careful. So anyway. All right, so if you noticed here, what happened is I have this picture, and it's the page, and that came out of Grub. So Grub imaged that for us. The Grub box is open source, so it's under github.com/cordless/grub-2.0. That's the repo, and it's just a simple crawler that uses Selenium and is able to image the page. And so we've got it all hooked up here, and what's great is it's scalable now. So I could have 30 people log in, they all start using it, the machine will get busy, and then it'll spool up more machines. Now these are still preemptible instances, so I'm saving money on them. They're cheap right now, but later on I'll make them faster. So you notice that this took a couple of seconds to run. Let me go grab some URLs. Hope I'm not yelling in the mic. Let me go grab some URLs here. I have a whole bunch of URLs I've been saving, and I exported them because I wiped the database for the URLs. I deleted the URL structure. We're going to talk about that here in a second. So let's crawl this site. I've noticed that it breaks every once in a while. So I have a friend who's showed me like it breaking on some site. So it's not perfect. So you may find that it doesn't bookmark or save or index, or I guess it's actually imaging it. It's not bookmarking it. It's not saving it, right? It's showing it to you. It's getting the picture and saving the picture, so it's not bookmarking it. I keep saying that, but I worry about it. I don't want to be necessarily be a bookmarking site. All right, so there's that URL, and it looks like little food delivery bots. So eventually we'll be cropping these images out completely. So we'll detect this as an image, and we'll pull that whole image out, and we'll save it as a separate picture. And in the testing that I was doing ones down to like 100 by 100, so it was pulling out images like these too. And it would pull this out as well, this thing over here on the side. It would probably pull that out as an image as well. So that's an ad, that's okay. And it was pulling out these, it was pulling out stuff like this. So that's some test code I wrote. I'm not gonna implement that yet. I wanted to get this part working, and then I can go back and work on it. Whenever I go back as the last pass, I'll add in payments and stuff like that, and then I'll add in little features like this that make it a little bit more complete. But we have the basic framework now in place for sending a URL off to the system, from the system, I should say. We're going to go into the architecture here in a minute, so I'll explain how that works. And then going off with the box, the Grub box, and imaging the page, and then passing it back and saving it in Google Cloud Storage. And so let me just show you a little bit of the structure of the image storage structure now. So these are all spools. So instead of this being a huge list of files, they're spools. And the nice thing is about that is that if there is a re-request, so like if I say something like this, I want another snapshot of Google News, well then I can make a copy of that. Now I haven't figured out quotas, so I'll need to implement something to limit the number of images that are being stored for each page. But basically right now I'll store however many pages that you want of this. As you want to image it. But I mean, if you have a paid account, then I guess that would be okay. If you wanted 1,000 images like this, well, whatever, you could do that. But I think I'll put a limit on how many snapshots I keep of a certain page, because I don't want to come across as like I'm making a copy of it where now everybody is going to use this copy. Like I'm going to spread this copy around. I made a copy of it for a user. They're paying me. I mean, I'll have some free accounts that you can try out, but the whole idea is eventually you're going to pay me. And as a customer of the service, you're paying me to take a picture of what you want to remember. And you found information on the web and you want me to take a picture of it for you. So I take a picture of it for you, and then I index that for you to make it searchable. So that's the service I'm providing, is searching for the things that you want to remember. And so, like a search engine. And so the whole idea of sharing this with somebody else is not something that I'm exploring. There will be some analysis of pages that are similar to each other in the system for discovery, but I'm not considering, if somebody wants to bookmark something, I don't want to like define for them, well, hey, here's a whole bunch of other stuff you want. Like, you're telling me to remember this URL, but the way we remember in a very specific way is not like a bookmark. We don't put a mark on the page itself. We actually take a picture of the page. So we don't, we remember the URL, but URL is just the source of the image. So once we get the image, then the image contains information that's different than, it's like making a copy of it. So it's like a copier, and then you're putting a like research folder together of the stuff that you're looking at, would be a better analogy, instead of just like, okay, I have this book and I'm putting a little note here that says go back to this. We're actually taking the whole page, making a copy of the page, and then we're sending the page off for analysis. We're extracting images out of the page. We're crawling into the page is what we're doing. So in order to crawl into the page, that's a much more involved thing than just remembering the URL. Yes, we know about the URL, but that becomes less important to us the more we crawl into the page and discover about what's in the page. Now, you can consider a crawler to be crawling into the page. If you have a bunch of URLs in a page, you crawl into them, well, then you go off to the other URLs, right? But if you crawl into a page, you could also crawl into more data. So you could say, well, there's a picture of a person on here. What are they wearing? Or there's a picture of a plant. What kind of plant is this? Okay, where is more information about this particular plant that we see in this photo? So that's the type of stuff I'm talking about going off and doing, not crawling the web, extracting URLs. All right, so this is the demo. One other thing that I would note here is, like, let's just go to Google News, and let's pick some cheerful news. Let's see, dark matter detector result is consistent with previous hints of exotic particles. Well, I guess that's good. That sounds like good news. So we're going to put, because we want to remember this, we're going to type mitta.us on the front of it, and we're going to hit enter. And we'll put a little slash there. And if you're not logged in, it's going to ask you to log in. If it sends you a token, you click on that token in your email, and then it'll take you back here, and it'll do exactly what it's doing right now, which is it's running through imaging that site. And so it's got a little bit about it, and then it's going to show us the thumbnail, and then it's going to take us to the page. And this is the page that's been imaged. So that's just a little handy feature that you can type mitta.us in the front of it, and then it'll take you to the image. I don't think I'm going to continue forwarding directly to it, but you can see when you go back, it takes you back to the page. So it gets out of your way. You don't really want to go back to Mitta at the point that you're browsing around on Google News or something like that. That's not the thing that you're wanting to do. You want to remember. You want to. Oh, look at this. I'm not at. Whoops. Something magical happened. I don't know what just happened. Oh, that was the picture. See, I'm even fooling myself now. Okay, so where's the thing about the cat? We got to see this. Yeah, this Zoom. This is why I'm writing Mitta, because I just love stuff on the internet. I don't know, total sucker for it. Anyway, so there was some attorney, and he was talking on some Zoom, and then he became a cat, evidently. I think he was playing him, but I don't know. Anyway, so we're going to do mitta.us, and then we're going to hit enter, and let's see what happens here on NBC News. So that was a video. I don't know if this is going to work or not. Let's find out. It might. I need to keep away in the system for when things break. so when it breaks for somebody that I can see it. I don't think that worked. Obviously, it's not going to play the video, but I was kind of hoping that it would load the video. But I don't think it did that. So we don't get to see the cat. That's too bad. Alright, well, we will still index the text on here, though. So that's what we want, is to be able to remember how to get back to the page later. So that's the point. Alright, so let's go in and talk a little bit about architecture. So we have a browser, which is what we've been in. And I'm not going to worry about that. I'm just going to let this be like this. So we have a browser, and we have in the browser, let's see here, we've got an input box. That's basically what we have. And then we have, can I type in the middle of this? No. Title, something bigger. Yes, big title. And then what we have is we have AppEngine. I'm just showing you the architecture of Mitta. This could be just the architecture of anything. It can be something that you create for yourself, for example. And so this is running, can I do an alt here? Yeah. So this is running Python. That's pretty much it. And containers. That's pretty much what's happening there. I guess that's too big. Make it smaller. There we go. So that's running Python. And then what we're going to have is we're going to have a series of boxes. Those don't look like boxes, but that's what they are. These are just servers. Nope. Let's see. I'll take this. So this is Ubuntu instance. So this is just an Ubuntu instances, I should say. Yep. And that's on Google Cloud. So this is running on Google Cloud. I mean, the whole thing is on Google Cloud, but this is called Google Compute. So I guess we could put compute there. Here. And inside of that is also Python. So we've got more Python running in here. And then we have a database. Can I make that bigger? An extra large database. There we go. And then we're going to make a copy of that. And then let me think about this. We have like a load balancer. And that kind of runs, let's see here. It should be over here somewhere. And then what we'd want also is maybe something like this that says APIs. So this is just basically how somebody can talk to the Mitta's API. So you have a load balancer sitting there for these instances, and then you have like AppEngine, which has its own load balancer that's handling the API, and I'll put it like this so that we can kind of differentiate the systems. And then this is compute. So this is like AppEngine land. There's a load balancer kind of lurking around out here. And then there's a bunch of compute instances. And then there's a database which is talking to, see if I can get this arrow over here like this. Look at my mouse. All right. And then we've got, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a big old database inside this box like this. And then I'm going to, and this is also one of the Ubuntu instances, so I'll kind of move this over like this. And these are the grub boxes. And let's see here. Yeah, like, that looks good. And then we're going to do something like that. And then maybe here it's Python on Ubuntu. That's pretty much, yeah. Okay, that looks pretty good. So this is the basic setup. And we've got some arrows that need to go in here. Let's see here. Yep. And that's just communications via the load balancer, I should say. To these boxes. And then we've got, oops, that actually looks better. Make them curved. Okay, and then we've got a connection going between AppEngine and Solr. All right. So this is the general. I'm gonna stand up. And I'm just gonna touch the microphone for just a second. Sorry about that. Just so it's pointing at me. All right. So then, if somebody comes in on they're on the website, then they're over here. They type in something, and then it sends it to AppEngine. So you've got obvious communications going on between here and here, and here and here. So AppEngine is kind of like the central hub for all this activity. And whenever AppEngine wants to tell Grub, excuse me, it wants to tell Grub something, then it hollers out to Grub through the load balancer. And I say hollers out, like Grub can be running on one or more boxes. So this is just a front end for all of these boxes, but when AppEngine reaches out to Grub, it only needs to talk to one box. So the load balancer handles that. And then what happens is when the Grub is done, it makes a call back to the API. So there's a callback that gets done through the API itself, like this. I'm going to put the database down here somewhere. The database is just AppEngine's database, so I could even display it. I mean, it's just kind of assumed it has a database here, like this, something like that. That's sort of how the front end Grub stuff works. And then Solr, AppEngine sends stuff to Solr and it pulls stuff back from Solr. And I don't envision, like, maybe when we have this guy call back to the system, we could alert to index, but that's what we're going to talk about now is like the indexing APIs. We're going to go into talking about what needs to be done next with the index APIs. So we'll get into that here in just a second. So that's really about it. I've covered in the previous episodes of coding Mitta that I think it's like in 2 or 3 I do a Grub load balancer deployment, and I basically make it to where this thing's scalable. So we can scale it up as much as we need to. It's not just a single box and doesn't have to be manually started. It's all under management right now, and it's like $30 a month right now, and it can scale up to as much as I need it to scale up. And efficiencies, if we need to make it more efficient later, we can. If this thing takes off, which hopefully it will, then we can deal with that problem when it becomes a problem. So we don't. It's funny because you're building something and you're like, well, okay, maybe you can imagine a whole bunch of people using it, and that's great. Even if it's not done and you can imagine a whole bunch of people using it, that's great, because that's kind of a confirmation that it might be useful. But if you are designing something and then you have limited resources, in other words, you can't make it perfect, then what you need to preference on is getting the features done and working enough that somebody can use it. A lot of you are like, well, why didn't you just build a single box that crawls and then do that? And the answer is twofold. And that number one, deploying that box is actually a lot of work. So that a lot of the work that's required for making it scalable is about deploying that box. So yes, we could build a box that just crawls, and we could just say that we're just going to run this thing and we're not going to make it preemptible, and it's just going to sit there, and that's its job, is take pictures of websites. That's all it does all day long. And but then in order to make it scalable, then you're going to have an upper limit on how many pictures it can take. So I don't have anybody using the site right now, so I need 0 pictures taken per minute, or whatever the criteria is for how fast it needs to go. And it takes about 10 seconds for it to run, and it pretty much slams the box while it's doing it. But there's probably like some means to like mitigate how long it takes to run on indexing something by just making it a faster box. So just by changing the box type to double the memory, it'll run twice as fast. So I'm able to get around that, but then the problem was starting them. So I could probably say, okay, I can make an image fast enough that I could just go ahead and launch, and I don't need to make it scalable. Well, then the problem is I have to restart it, so I had to write all that code. So by the time I got done with it, it was literally just go over into Google's managed instance templates, and then paste in what I had created for starting the box, and then just tell it to create an instance group, and that was it. And that was really just like 2 hours of work. So in the case of something like that, if you architect it right, then you can get away with using somebody else's tools to scale. Then you don't really have to think about it if you do it right. But at the same time, if you're sitting there, really building your own solution for scaling, it might not be a good idea. You just try to do it to where you can get away with it. And that's what I've done, is just done the bare minimum of what I can get away with Grub. To be able to let me move on so that I can work on more different aspects of the system that need to be done for this thing to be completed. And now one of those is indexing. All right, so we're going to jump over into the code, and we're going to take a look at what indexing used to look like. And let's talk a little bit about indexing. So we're going to take a look at the search command. So you can see a whole bunch of information came back here. So what it's doing here, if we look at search, is this is the search handler. So if we do inspect the console here, I say inspect the console, if we inspect the page there, then we can see that in network, and we're going to run this command again, that we're running a command that says search space star. So it's like querying the endpoint of S with this string. So if you look at this, that's what it's sending, is the bang search. And I did this on purpose. The whole idea being that it was the first version of this, and I just didn't want to change what was being passed around, so I made it to where every time something happened, you were passing around that, or whatever the command was. So if you type in something else, it'll pass around that. But in this particular case, search loads this search.js. So when I hit enter here, it loads this file. This is the file that gets loaded. It's executed dynamically using eval. And then what happens is inside of here, you've got a call to S, the S endpoint. Now if we go over and look at the docs, and we look at the search endpoint, then what it says here is it's got things like, it says, okay, search uses GET requests. So if I do get S sidekick name, and in the case of creating the sidekick, they're created here. So you create them using the index methods, and then you search those sidekicks with the search method. So if you look here, we're missing a whole bunch of stuff. We're number one, we're passing in what the user typed in the shell, which is, this really is then just a UI handler at this point. This is not actually a true API. Now, like if you think about that, I am calling this S endpoint. So if we went over to look at the settings endpoint, I'm sorry, the search endpoint, then you can see here, I'm taking in the line, and I have some other stuff like ID, doc ID. This stuff is like, this is all going bye-bye. I'm getting rid of all that. It was about when I got to this part, when I was thinking through all this, I was like, I architected the front part of it wrong. So that's why I went back and did the APIs. But you can see here in this case, it's, it's not doing much. It's saying, I'm going to query, I'm going to query documents, and that's libsolr. So if we go up and look at libsolr, and we look at query documents, we're taking in the user ID, so the user's unique ID, the line they typed in the shell, and then a doc ID. I don't even remember the doc ID part. I don't know what that does. I think that was just designed to find a document if you had the doc ID. I think that's what I was going to do with it. But I'm going to do it a different way now. And so then you go through here and you get down to here and you do some timestamp stuff. And the reason you do that is because you end up with a means of constraining the search to a given time frame. And the time word stuff, what it does is it takes something like a text string like last hour, and it turns it into a start and end time that's actually a time string, a timestamp that Solr understands. So what I'm doing is, like, this file basically converts, human thoughts like week or something like that, last week, turns it into a thing that that the computer can understand when it's querying it. So going back into search, you can see this stupid simple. I mean, there's just really nothing to this. So the logic here, this is going to get more complicated. So this file actually needs to be doing all of the search stuff over here. So it needs to provide all this search methodology, this method over here for search. It's essentially a pass-through to Solr's. Solr has an API as well. So I'm just leveraging Solr's API here. I'm not doing anything special. That's why the code is so simple. But in the case of searching here and querying this document, I just do a couple of things. I just figure out what the time range is we want to work on. So that's the Solr time. And then I was doing some testing here, but it's basically saying if there's no text and there are tags, then use the tags, but I don't think that's working, so I think all that's broken. So basically what's happening is the Solr query is turning into it's saying that it requires that the words that are indexed, and if we look here, so you should see words here, words right there. So then if that, what I'm saying is I insist that when you do a search that you match whatever the words are to this. So if I type in search foo, then it should just give me those entries where I type foo. And there it is right there. And if I type something unique, like unique, and then I say search unique, then it should bring back that entry, and it did. That's where it echoed it right there. So search is working. There's just one box running. We're going to deploy a Solr cloud whenever I get done with all the code. Then Solr will be redeployed into Solr cloud configuration so that there's backup servers and things like that. That Solr can be configured in that configuration. I just haven't done it yet because of what I was talking about before. It's just not. There's no point in doing it until I get done with the code. So, and this works well enough that the instance that is running the Solr, that is running Solr for this, is fast enough that it works fine for me. Even if a couple of people were using it, it'd still be plenty fast enough. And I'm able to start it, and it's able to be shut down. So it shuts down cleanly, starts back up cleanly. So no corruption in the Solr indexes or anything like that occurs when it's shut down, and that's great. That's what you want. In case a box ever goes down, you want to be able to bring that box back up later. A lot of times, companies will create maybe a cluster of servers if you're into that, or if you're doing it on Kubernetes or something. But you'll create a cluster of servers, and then what happens is, at some point in time in the future, then somebody like Amazon says, well, you're going to have to reboot those boxes, and then you reboot them and they don't come back up for some odd reason. It's happened. Then by having a box where it's always being shut down and started back up, you alleviate those types of problems. You're always testing your systems by starting those boxes over and over again. All right, so with that said, let's go over and take a look at the index definitions. Now, I'm pretty much done with all this stuff up here. There's some stuff that needs to be fixed with the tokens. Like, somebody noticed that you couldn't share an image even if you had your token. I'm actually okay with that, because I don't know that I want you to be able to share the images at all with people. You should be able to have your credentials. Like, if I send it to you on your phone, knock yourself out. Send it to somebody else. That's your business, who you want to SMS stuff to. Go for it. Or on Slack. Eventually we'll have a Slack bot, and then you could send whatever I send you, whatever the bot sends you on Slack, then you could use that or for whatever. But then on the web, I'm kind of on the fence about whether or not I'm going to let people share these images or not. I'm tending toward not, because if you're imaging a website, most websites are copyrighted and trademarked. So that's not my content, and so it's not for me to share that information or that content. So, but anyway, I am kicking around the ability to share it in a limited way that makes sense for you wanting to keep a record of it and using it for personal use. It's fair use. So you're allowed to make a copy of it for fair use. I'm allowed to make a copy of it for you for fair use. Okay, so in index methods, the index methods are going to take the spools. So if you read up here, it says, so we're talking about the spool methods or the upload methods. Create and accept sets of similar images, that's a spool, for storage in a document with a source type of spool. Spools are ingested by both the index methods, and here we go. Right here. Both the index methods. Set kickbacks. No, that's not it. It's this one right here. Spools are ingested by both the index methods and the tagging methods. So if we look at, where'd it go? Come here, Balsamic. Alright, so I'm going to click on new, and then I'm going to drag out a rectangle, and then another rectangle. Let me think about this. And another rectangle. Alright, so here, I'm going to click in here, and I'm going to copy this guy. Okay, and then I think I'm just going to make, get rid of that, get rid of that. Okay, then I'm going to do this. Okay. And I'm going to put that over there, and then what do I want this to say? I want this to be the URLs. So those are URLs that people create. And then this one is images. Nope. Yep. Images. Okay. And then the last one is spools. So what I decided to do was combine these. Originally I don't know what that's doing. I don't even know what I'm doing. Talking and trying to type at the same time. Okay, so we're going to do this. And then this. So if somebody goes in and says, here's a URL, well, what's the end result? Well, it's an image. It turns into an image. We've seen that in the UI. Whenever you give it a URL, it turns it into an image. So then if you have an image, so let's say you start out and you have a URL. Well, okay, you give me the URL, but the way that you do that is you do that through the grub endpoint, the crawl endpoint here. So that goes out and runs grub. So if we look here, really the process here is that it goes through something like this. So it runs grub, and then it turns it into images, and then it sticks it in the spool. In the case of images, it's just you sticking images in the spool. So in the case of the upload here, once you create a spool, once you create a target for the upload, then you can upload any images you want into it. In the case of the crawl endpoint, it creates the place to upload it and then uploads it, but then assigns a URL to the spool. In the case of creating the spool from scratch using the upload method here, the posts to /u, then what it does is it creates a spool, but it's empty and it doesn't have a URL. The URL is actually the site itself. It's a special URL for Mitta to show the images to the user. So yeah, that's it. So URLs and images got merged into this object called spools, and now what we're talking about is taking spools and throwing it into, where's our database? There it is. And we got to make it extra large again. There we go. And then throwing that into, nope, we want a copy of it. No, I don't want to do that. I want a copy. There we go. You don't, I guess you don't click on the little thing. You don't click on that thing while you're doing it. All right. So we want to talk about indexing these now. So we're going to basically take and allow images to come in and images to come out. And then we allow URLs to come in. So technically that would be a one-way arrow here, like the other way, like that. And then we read and write spools from the index. So in other words, if somebody came in and searched for something that was in one of these images or was on the web page, the URL that pointed to the web page, and once we looked at the web page, we saw that it said something. Well, that's in the index. So somebody does a query to the index, then it returns the spool. And then the spool will say, well, it's, I have it in the image, but it actually has a URL, and here's the URL for it. So click on the URL, and you can go and look at the actual content. In the case of the images, we have the URL to show you the images because you uploaded them to us directly. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So that's sort of how I reasoned through how to create the spools. So the thing is the index itself ingests, let's see down here, if we look at it, it says send a document to the sidekick. So the document is the spool. The spool is what is going to be considered as a document. That document will contain multiple images. Those will go into the index. So, well, I guess we need to look at what the time is. So I've got, 43 minutes, 45 minutes. Check the video resolution. My video resolution is fine, YouTube. It seriously is. It's great. I have this widescreen. I have an LG widescreen. It's my monitor. I don't know. I can't stream any more or any less of it. If I try to stream less, and then I have to remember where the edges are, it's just a mess. So this is the way I do it. I could get a different monitor, I guess. So we're going to need to let's see, so we've done all the upload. I say we've done all the upload ones. Some work needs to be done still on uploads. I'm going to do that offline. But the indexing part, it needs to be done like ASAP. And so that's what we're going to do today is we're going to start working on the index dot py file. I'll make sure I don't have an index.py yet. I don't. I had ended up, I was like, well, how am I going to do this? I had not figured out the APIs at all. So there's index.py. So what we're going to do, and of course, did I put it in the wrong? I put it in a template file. Why did I do that? Delete file. Go back in here. Yes, this is where I want it. And hello, index.py. Save. Okay. So now we're going to go into crawl, and what we're going to do is we're just going to steal some stuff out of here. This is how I roll. All right. Let me take all that stuff out of there, and then we're going to go in here, and we're going to paste all that in. And then I'm going to kind of noodle through here and decide what I need. Okay, so do I need to do requests? Well, Solr is really what has been dealing with the requests for me. So maybe, but it's got the add document, it's got count document. So it's talking, this is abstracting out Solr for me. You can see here, this is like a create collection. So if the collection doesn't exist, and I'm trying to query for it and it doesn't exist, it'll create it for me. So Solr is doing a bunch of stuff, and my tendency is to continue to let it do that. But now, if you think about it, the Solr server is a data store. So you could sort of treat it like an instance of a class. It could be an instance of a class, right? If it was an object, it's an instance. It's the Solr server. So putting it off into a library, like a static library or something, is just like, it's just a thin wrapper for translating from one API call to the other. Might not be the right thing to do with it, but that's where we're going to leave it for now. So I kind of talked through a little bit of it. Seems like it seems like I want to leave it there, but if things change, then we'll see. We'll see what happens. Okay, so we do have a search endpoint handler already, which is kind of interesting, because it's handling, because we are going to have to replace it, but it's currently working, so we're going to need to work around that. But what we might be able to do is make this work with the indexing stuff that we're doing. But I may not even worry about that because it's like an hour and some change left in the video, and just even the idea of creating a new index and remembering the indexes, this is going to be a lot of work. So I'm not going to try to bite off too much here. And let me make sure, in this I've got, let's see here, I gotta go to my kid would laugh at me. He might be laughing at me right now, you never know, he could be watching. So I just want to make sure, we'll index, and yeah, that's exactly what, as long as, yeah, my mouse cursor locked up last time. I was at the end of my stream of like episode 9, and then I'm like, it was a pretty bad stream anyway, nothing was working. And I couldn't figure out any of that MIME type stuff. And so anyway, I at the end of the stream, then my mouse, I couldn't even click on Windows. It was a disaster. So then I ended the stream and cried a little bit, but it happens. So this is a much better stream so far. So all right, so let's take a look at index.py. So we probably are going to need libsolr. We're definitely going to need spools. Documents are not going to be a thing anymore, I don't think, because a spool is a document. And then the spool handles also collections of images, so images are not directly a document. Images become part of a document through being in a spool. All right, so Flask stuff, yes, we need that. Do we need the pill stuff? No. IO? No. Beautiful soup? No. Are we going to save stuff into storage? Maybe. I don't know. We'll come back and add that if we need to. We definitely need blueprint, request, make response, render template, abort. We need those. We need Flask login. We need the spool. We're going to need some Solr stuff, and we probably need builder, because builder is the thing that processes the line that gets posted. And I don't know, in this case, this is the index. So do I continue keeping that line intact through like the API call? I don't know. I think I talked about this in the last video, but I'm leaning toward not allowing people to pass the lines in via the API, but maybe I'll end up doing that. I'm not sure. I'll probably do it offline. I would rather people have a structured means of making calls into the system, you know, stuff like this, like give me a token, give me a title, give me the description. I don't really want them, you know, having to craft some abstract line entry that you can type in the shell too. So, generate token, find URLs, SMS user. We don't need to SMS the user here. We probably don't need to find URLs. I'll leave random string in here. And I'm going to take out HTML crawl. Okay, so now these are the index handlers. And we're going to call this index. This is all Flask, Python Flask code. Index handlers and Flask login, that's correct. And then what do we want here? Let's see, the first one is post I creates a new sidekick. Create. I think that's what we want. So now what we're going to do is we're going to stub these out. So again, the sort of the process that I went through. Well, pseudo soup is in here. Well, hello. I see your cats. Perfect. It is my kid. Hello, kid. You're the streamer, man. All right. So This is a list. So this is the, so get I, so get the index. So the first one is the post, so it's going to create an index, which we have in this Solr, this thing right here, create a collection. So it's going to create a collection. That's what we want it to do right there. And then in index, so right here we're going to create a collection, and then in get, with the get instead of the post, we're going to return a list. Well, let's stub that one out. That'll be a good place to start, because we're going to have to go create a model for these things. All right, so we put the index handler route G, and then this is the get. And I suppose I should update these. So this is get a list of users' sidekicks. And then this one is create a new sidekick for the user. And we've got logins required on both of those. So let's see, we're going to do a return OK. Return OK. All right. Oh, I need to fix these. So that's an I. And then that's an I. And I'm registering those. And then in main, I need to register them again here. So it ends up, we need to pass it this name right here when we define it as a blueprint inside of the file itself. This is kind of like, it's a way to like separate the logic of the method handlers to the route for the routes. So what we need to do is look here. So it's called index handlers. So we need to go back to main, and then we need to type in index handlers here. That should work. So it says the error is index handlers is not defined. Line 84 main. Okay, so what happened there is we didn't import it, so then we need to go in here and import it. So we need to say from web index import index handlers. Then we go back and rerun this. Now we got another one. It says existing endpoint function something or another index.create. Line 85 doesn't like something about that. It's probably, I don't know, like if I had to guess, it's I've duplicated some name space or something. So let's see, crawl handlers. So that's in web crawl here, and then import crawl handlers, and then that's called crawl, and then these are called crawl handlers. These can be called whatever you want. So then go back to index. So that's index handlers, index handlers, index.py, main. Yeah, index handlers here. That's where it's freaking out though. Web index, import index handlers. Index handlers equals blueprint index. That doesn't have, these are not the same thing. This is just the name of the blueprint, which that can be completely different from the methods in here. Oh, I've got two create functions. So this is details, because you're getting information on those details. I gotta check my chat. Yes, we did it, chat. Sweet. Text is hard to read. Spam cats to get me to read chat. I should read chat. You're the first person that well, howdy gamer. You're the first person that's been in here, so you're the first person I've talked to, so that's fantastic. Welcome. It's not like gaming. It's a little different than gaming. It's like I have to think about coding, and then I have to be out thinking about being cordial. Okay, so create and get. So that looks fine. So this should run. I'm getting another error here. No, we're running. Sweet. Okay, so now we're going to do a curl local host 8080 / and then the endpoint is I question mark token equals, and then I need to get my token. Oh, there's my token. And I'm going to paste my token in here. Let's see, that's shift insert and hit enter. And it said OK right there. So if we change the token to slightly, invalid token. All right. So we know this is working. This one is working. I guess we could check the post, but it's probably fine, so we don't need to worry about that. Okay, so the thing that we need to worry about next is creating a new sidekick. So we don't have anything like a sidekick. What did I change in here? Nothing? No. Hit the space bar or something. Close some of this stuff. Whoops, I closed the wrong one. So I want index. And then I want models. So in my models, I do have a URL. I don't know why that's in there. Thought I took URLs out, but whatever, it doesn't matter. And I have a document. I've left this in here so far because you can see I was like dealing with the images and the file names. I had no idea what I was doing the first time. So we've got all that sorted around with spools. So documents is really not a thing anymore, but maybe what we'll do is we'll just comment all that out. And then let me think about this URL thing. So it says class URL. It says, get all. Oh, I think I did this. Oh, I know why I did this. Because I wanted to get all of my URLs out of here. So let me go in here and look real quick. So I go into the data store entities. And I go into URL. There they are. So this was just the URLs and a bunch of descriptions, which I don't need those because I can go and hit them up again. I deleted all the images for all these. There was no way to tie the two entities together. Tying a URL together and an image together, it just wasn't working, which is why I did the spool stuff. So I think, yeah, I have all this now. It's just saved as test URLs in here. So I have it is called URLs down here somewhere, right here. That's all these URLs. So I'm going to get rid of these because I don't need them anymore. And I don't want it to keep confusing me, so I'm going to delete this. Delete. Delete. What I need is like some way to like ping me whenever somebody says something in chat. It like pops up. Oh, I could put chat on my phone. Sure, I can do that. I'll do that next time. I don't want to cut into the stream. I actually want to get some code done. So, all right. So you said the text is too small. That's probably this text, huh? Maybe this text too. That's too bad. I tried to increase my resolution a little bit. So let me know how that looks. These are already pretty big. Okay, so we can get rid of URL. So we're going to do that now. Transactions are used for when you do this. So if I go to, let's go to Hacker News. I got to get my little drip of pattern matching accepted for Python. I don't even know what that means. Sounds interesting. Mitta.us. So when you put that in there, you see this. There's that thing right there. That's the transaction. And what that does is it allows the site to accept a URL on the end as if it's part of the path that's being loaded on Mitta. So in other words, this becomes part of Mitta's path. And then, but you don't want to let just anybody do that. You want authenticated users to do that. But anyway, it's complicated and you just want them to be able to do it once. You don't want them to be able to go back. So if they try to go back to it, it shouldn't work again. It should stop what it's doing. So that's what the transactions are for. They're just little transactions that pop in and out. And it's like a little mini token. You give the user a little tiny token, they're able to add a URL using the path. And there's the file, so that's done and saved. Not indexed though, but it's in there. All right, so now what we need to do is create, I'm going to do that down here. We need to create something, a class for sidekicks. So seeing how the user class is called user, not users, even though I put settings, I knew that was going to be It's like you don't want to call it setting. That doesn't look that doesn't look good. So that's settings, but this is sidekick. Sidekick. So an instance will be a sidekick NDB model. All right, and then we want, so what do we have on a sidekick? We have a user ID, so we have an owner of it. So this is the user. And then what do we have? We have a name. Sidekicks have names. So NDB string property name. And what else do they have? Presumably they'll have a box where they live. So they could have like a cluster they live on or something like that. I don't know. It doesn't need to be added right now. I guess we could put when they're created. I don't know if that's useful. It's probably not useful. You can put when they're updated, but then what information about a sidekick is going to be updated in this model? Not much. What else do we need to put in here? Think about this, it's like, it's just going to be a name, basically. This is it. It's its name. It has a number of documents, but that can be done by querying it. Yeah, I don't feel like, but I might want, I'm going to put when it's created. I think that makes sense. I don't know. Created. And then, what else? That's just because I have it here. When I was thinking about it before, evidently I decided I should put it in there, so there it is. We don't want to put num docs in here. And the reason why is the user's adding docs to it, then we'd have to update this all the time. And it really doesn't bias anything. We just do a query whenever you log in. You refresh this page and it says search index, so it's already doing that. So it already returns how many documents there are in it. Here we're just making the ability to toggle between indexes. So in Solr parlance, I guess, I'm making things more confusing. In Solr parlance, you have a search index which can then live inside of a collection of indexes. I think this is how it works. And then collections live in cores if you're in Solr Cloud. But if you're not in Solr Cloud and you're on a single instance of Solr, then I think it's called a core and a collection. There's a collection per core, but I think you can still have multiple indexes in a core. I don't know. Maybe the Solr expert on hand, the search expert on hand in chat will let me know. OBS is scaling your resolution 1920 by 1080. Really? That's weird. I mean, maybe it's doing that in the, like in the live stream it's doing that. But then whenever it's recorded, it looks normal. That's weird. I haven't said, anyway. I don't know. Help me later. Okay. I'm plowing onwards. Okay. So we're still in models, put 2 lines there between our classes, and I'll probably just, crash that. So we don't need number of docs. What else do we need here? I don't think anything. We just need the who owns it, what its name is, when it was created. Maybe we could save Solr URL in here. That might be somewhat useful. I don't know. Maybe if we were going to change them around or something. Like we have multiple servers. All right, I think that's it. So what we're going to need is a couple of class methods. So the first one we need is we need to be able to create the sidekick. So that's, you're going to call that with user ID. And then the name, not the name, you're not going to call it with the name, we're going to give it the name. And then what else? We don't need methods. I think that's it. So with client context, this just tells the NDB import up here at the top. This thing right here, when you say with client context, it just like puts it in that context of that library, so that it can assist you with talking to the database. CLS. And this is where we're going to create it and put it. So that's where it gets updated. And then we're going to put user ID equals UID, name equals, I don't know, something. What else? Created equals datetime dot datetime dot UTC now. And then Solr URL equals let's see here if we can go into Solr and pull that out. This stuff right here. So config Solr URL, which will contain the username and password needed for accessing it. So I think this whole thing right here is what we want. That thing. I kind of want to do it up here. Let's see, Solr URL, just so that it's not all down in the middle of everything. And then we got to fix this UID thing. So the name and the collection are called the same thing, which is fine because that's what we have to do with this standalone thing. So when we figure out the Solr Cloud stuff, we can fix that later. But here, the name and the collection are going to be called the same thing, but they're not going to be the user ID. So this needs to be something like, oh, I need to make up a name for it. So name equals that's not in here. I have a name maker. I need to go find it. So this is the name maker. And then that's going to be name, I think. Here, name, like that. That's going to be the Solr URL. And keeping in mind that I don't know about putting this Solr URL in here, but we're going to do it anyway. Right there. Because we'll be able to use the name to look it up and to build the URL. So we could rebuild the URL somewhere else. This might be the place to do it. I don't know. It's kind of a tough one. It's like the object itself is an index, which then has a place it lives, a home that's on the Solr server. But then does the Solr server have its own? Does it have an object that represents it? Because that's the config Solr URL, which we're hard coding right now, but later it'll be the cloud. So we're going to use the cloud to scale it and also eliminate, having to keep an idea of a Solr index or Solr server around. I was toying around with the idea of keeping a list of boxes, like grub boxes, for example, that are crawling, keeping a list of those so that I could keep track of them, but then I realized that was just pointless. It's like I was over-architecting it. So I went back and used those instance templates that Google has for that. So I want to err on the side of making this simple, but I don't want to put this in a complicated location. I think this is fine. Okay, now what I need is that name creation function. What did I do with that? Let's see, did I put it in random string, command list, time word, user, email user? What if I put it in grub? I don't see it in here. I know it was around somewhere. Let's CD slicer code, test code. Okay, well, I'm going to go Google it. So let's see, we need Python random name generator. Name generator. Random name generator. Oh. Maybe? I think it's something like this though. Maybe it's this one. This is it. Pip install name generator. Okay, so it's going to be a requirement because we're going to have to pip install it. So we're going to go into our requirements.txt file and we're going to type in, well, we're going to have to install it first. So let's see, we're going to take this and we're going to copy it. We're going to go over and we're going to run it here in PowerShell. That's such a horrible color. So we've got 106. So it's name generator 1.06. Like that. So then that way, whenever we do a build and a deployment, the build is actually just take all the files and then do a deployment to Google AppEngine. Then what happens is before it actually does the deployment, it'll build a container, and then the container will have a list of things that it installs with pip, and it'll pull from this file. So it'll install all these things from that file before it builds the container to run on AppEngine. Okay, so now the way we use it is like this: import name generator, and then we do name generator gen. I guess that's what we're going to do. So we want to do name generator gen, like that. And then at the top we got to put import name generator. I'm going to put it like right here. I kind of sort these. So like, for example, the last import is config, because that's like the most relevant to this file. Like it relies on config. If you don't have config, none of this works. And then it kind of goes backwards from there. So at the top, then you've just got like the standard imports. And then as you go down, I try to like, separate these into, like libutil is like still my code. So like my code configuration, my code, then the code I use for logins, then that code I use for the database, then other code, like requests, for example. All right, let's fire this up and see if it works. Cannot import document from web models. That's because I deleted it, right? So line 20 from site. Here. From web models document. And spool, URL, right? And then let's see here. So we're not using documents. Document. I don't think it's in there. Oh. So we were importing it, but not actually using it. And then URL. Huh, interesting. Oh, this is my backup that I was using the other day, so I gotta take that out. That was just to back up the URLs. Just wrote a little API, a real quick and dirty API to pull all the URLs out of the database. All right, let's try this again. We got another error from line 19 in upload pi. Line 19 in upload pi. From web models, import user, document, and spool. So I'm going to delete document, I'm going to save that, and then I'm going to find document. And all those have been commented out. So I do need to go back for the upload APIs. I need to go back and trim out all this code out of here. I'm waiting until I get done with the index APIs. So I might need to go in here and look at this. I'm not sure. I'm getting a little nervous about deleting document now. It might have been a little bit much. Yeah. So crawl is now fussing about it. Okay, so we got to go into crawl. I think this is actually good because crawl shouldn't be using document. All right. Does libsolr use it? I hope not. No, it doesn't. All right. I mean, I was storing an extra document in the database, so I would index something, and then it would create a document, and then it would insert the document, but then it would like keep the document in the database too, and it would be in Solr. So it's pointless to have two. Log in. Three, two, 8, 3. I'm just making sure this still works. So it does. Should be 2 of them now. Yes. Okay. Great. Okay, going back to models. Let's take a look at our sidekick entry. So what we want to do now is we want to run this create function. So when we run in index, when we hit the /i endpoint with a post, and we have to go in here and look at the reference. So it says, creates a new sidekick, requires token. So it only requires a token. So let's go ahead and build the URL here. So curl localhost 8080/i. But then we gotta do a post. So that's a capital X post space like that. And we can do one of two things here. We can actually do a -d, and then we can put token equals inside of the quotes. And I'm gonna go ahead and do that. It's a Doge out there. Shift insert, and then hit enter, and then it says okay. So that's great. And then I'm gonna change the token, and it says no. So that's good. So that means it's authenticating us via the APIs. All right, so now what we need to do is we need to actually tell it to go ahead and create a new sidekick. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to go right here. We're going to say sidekick equals sidekick dot create. And then we need to pass it our user ID. So our user ID is equal to I gotta look here. Let's see, it's Flask login dot current user dot UID. And then we want to I have to look here if we need to make sure we have that. And then we also need to make sure we have the client connection. So we need to import ndb to be able to talk to the database, which again is on Google. So Google is running our database for us remotely in the cloud. But then we need to have created a client connection with the ndb client method that then puts us in the context so that we can actually query the objects that it's returning for us. So then client, with client context, we're going to then print sidekick. And this should print out the sidekick's attributes for us, which includes that funny name. So we should get a sidekick popping out here. Cannot import name sidekick. Did I fix that? From web models. Oh, it's an index at the top. There we go. All right, now we're going to run this again and we should get a sidekick back. Name maker is not defined. Well, we didn't finish our code, did we? Let's see here. So in creating it, so this is index, this is posting it, and we go into the models, and that's it right there. And I guess what I did is I got ahead of myself. I need to put it here because we have to have the URL contain it too. Then this needs to be named. All right, now we'll run that again, see what happens. Not all arguments converted during string formatting. Line 140 models. 140 models here. We've already, I think this was erroneous code, that doesn't belong there. So we're pulling the Solr URL from here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to print Solr URL here, just so I can see it. I'm going to check chat. We'll do 007. Oof. Oh, look, we had 3 viewers for a second. They're like, what in the world is this? I thought this was some gamer playing games. Okay. So, I'm going to close this. We don't need that anymore. And we're going to run this again. It's going to blow up. Cannot set property create. This was a long one. Good Lord. Cannot set property create. Well, it's not a property, it's a method. Let me see here. What am I doing wrong? Did it print the name? It did. Oh, like chat. I'm giving up my key again. I'll change that. I always do afterwards. So it says here, Geeky Violent Hedgehog. Geeky Violent Hedgehog. So that was the collection. And so that looks good. I don't see anything wrong with this. Let's take this and see if we can use it. This thing right here. That should work. Maybe it didn't work. I think this is the wrong token. I feel like that's the wrong token. It doesn't actually matter for this. This is okay. This looks like it's okay. So the URL, the Solr URL, I don't know if I'm going to use that immediately. So we'll see what happens here, how far we get. Checking chat again. So I got 30 minutes. So Solr URL, it printed it, and then it blew up here. and it blew up saying, what? Cannot set non-property create. Cannot set non-property format name. This thing right here. Solr. Well, this is definitely a problem with the model. This thing. So it's called Sidekick. It is a class method. It's got all the class methody things in there. It doesn't have a return. Here. So we want to query by UID and name, I think. I don't think we're going to have any name collisions, but you never know. So user ID and name is how we're going to query for it. And the name is set here. Okay, let's try this again. So we're returning that here, but in the index, we're just returning OK, but we should be able to see the sidekick pop out. Well, receive failure, connection was reset. I don't think it really meant that. No, there it is. Cannot set non-property create. Line 40. Line 140 in models. Here. So, been my experience that that's the error from this entire CLS. So it's something happening inside of this. So it'll print out the last, or it'll show you the last one in the error log. So it says, sidekick create user ID flash login current user ID. From line 36 index. Flask login current user or user ID. I don't think there's a problem with this, but I'm just going to print it real quick. So there's the user ID, which used to be the collection name. So that looks fine. Cannot set property create. Chat, fix my problem. Isn't that how it works? Well, it says type error cannot set property format name. In set attributes. What I'm doing right now is, because I don't actually know what that error means, is I'm just looking here at this. And I'm looking at this, and I'm looking at this, and I'm saying, are these similar? Because I know this one works. I mean, it could be this guy. I take this one out. and rerun it. Now, if it gives me the same error, then I can, and it does, then I can take that out. Now I know that that's not it. That's just a hunch. I didn't actually know what was wrong with it. I was just guessing. Because it was like, what is different here? So now I'm looking for like commas. Is it a comma problem? Like there's a comma here, but I don't think that comma is supposed to be there. So I think this is okay. These are all commas. So there's the user ID, the name, the created. So that right there. So created, and that was what it was fussing about, right? It was fussing about created, but it was reporting it on line 139. And I guess that was the line, wasn't it? Who knows? I think that fixed it. Bam! And there's the sidekick, okay? So we have a create time, we have a name, Tasty Gambo Schloth. Well, that's fitting, isn't it, pseudo soup? Look at that right there. A Solr URL, that looks good. I think that looks fantastic. We've got the user ID in there. Now we're going to go in there and validate that it's in the entity store. So we're going to refresh this. This is the NDB database, the cloud storage stuff, and there's the sidekick. Sidekicks are really finally becoming a thing now. They have their own database. And there's his name, Tasty Gambo Sloth. Great. Yes. Oh, the problem was I was being silly. I had left a D off of that. That was the problem. All right. So far, what do we have? We have the ability to create a sidekick. We probably ought to be able to delete a sidekick. And I've talked about this before, but I don't know about putting delete sidekick in here because it's so easy to delete a entry in the database from code. I just do it from the code. I don't actually create a class method for it. I don't see a point for it. By the way, this class method operates on the class itself. So an instance method will operate on an instance of the class itself. So one instance. In this case, create works across all sidekicks. If you can think about the idea of like a sidekick, well, you can have an instance of a sidekick, so a particular sidekick with a particular name, but you can't create that sidekick. You can only create a new sidekick. So sidekick is a class method in that case. In Python, you have instance methods, and then you have class methods, and then you have something else like static methods or something like that. I don't understand all of it. We need a way to get a user's. We're going to have an entry in here for return a list of sidekicks. So on the get I, which I put in here is like, let's see here, where is it? Index. Yeah, so this get I, return a list of user sidekicks. So that's the query. So we need to go back into models. We need one more thing here. This, like really working in models, it's about, all the models are pretty much the same. I mean, there's this stuff like JSON property stuff you have to deal with, like with the spool, like for the file names and tags, because they're lists of stuff. Like you have to keep a list. So you create an instance, there's like a class instance created, like there's a spool. So a spool with a given name. But then that spool with a given name has a list of file names. So you don't want to create a list of file names somewhere else. You just make a little tiny list and stick it in there. So we need this standard get all. And in this case, I'm saying fetch 10, but I think that I said on the site itself it's 3. So if you go back here, I say you get 3 of them. Is that not working? So you sign up and you get 3 sidekicks. So fetch, I don't know, 3. But then if we add one, we need to do a get all. I guess we ought to do a get all before we gotta check to see if we're okay to create one or not. So here in the index, when we're creating one for the user, we want to say sidekicks equals sidekick get all user ID equals flask. Login.current user.uid. Then we want with client context print sidekicks like so. Yep, that looks good. So now we're going to create another sidekick. It says okay. This one's called Wiggy Cinnamon Chipmunk. Did it print all 3 of them? I think it did here. I don't know, that just looks like. Let's put that down here where it belongs. Well, we're going to need to do it there too because we got to get a count. So that's a get. So we want to do a get here. So this is the get. And then it printed something. Oh yeah, so there's the first one, there's the second one. So you say Wiggy Cinnamon Chipmunk and Tasty Gamboge Sloth. Let's go see how many we've got in the database, just to make sure. Yeah, we've just got 2. So that's good. We're seeing both of them. So then we could say sidekicks. We say oh, you know what we have to do? We have to do exactly what we had to do with the spools. So we've got to go copy the template file for the spools. And here's the template file for the spools. So I'm going to copy that, and then I'm going to do new, and I'm going to say this is sidekicks.json. This is the template for the index. I mean, we're returning sidekicks, so I'm calling it sidekicks, not indexes. Even though the endpoint file is called index. It's like index.py, but that's because it's handling the index methods, which deal with sidekicks. But then the things that are returned are sidekicks, so that's why we call the template file sidekicks. All right, sounds reasonable. All right, paste that in. So we've got a time in every single response that we have on the system. We have a timestamp returned. We have the result, which is always success if this file is used. If it's not, then it's a fail. And then we're looping through sidekicks in this case. Sidekick and sidekicks. And then we want to say in the data object, if we look at the spec, up here, API. Just got a prod, so it's not down. Then I'll make this a little bit bigger. Then we want to return sidekicks. And then inside of that, for each sidekick and sidekicks, we want to return when it was created. So this is sidekick created, and then we want to format it for the user. All of these date stamps or time stamps or dates or whatever these are, date time objects, are all formatted to where Solr can manipulate them. So that's I'm just standardizing on that. The NDB database doesn't store it like that, so I have to convert it. All right, so then we want the sidekick name. And then we're talking about Solr URL. But here's the problem with that, is that if we show that to the user, then it has our token in it, which is a little silly, so we're not going to do that. I'll leave that out. So it's got the name. The user knows it's there, so we don't need to put the username. And we don't have to loop through any of this complicated file name stuff like we did in spools. I guess there's supposed to be a mood. So I guess all sidekicks are puzzled to start with. The idea behind the mood is that you'll be able to change a sidekick's approach to indexing things or searching by moving it through, like have different settings for it. So like you could say that, for example, it's in aggressive mode, it's like going out and finding URLs to crawl. If it's in interested mode, it's like looking for things inside of the images that it's collecting. Things like that. I don't know. We'll see what happens with it. It's a concept. That looks good, except for the fact that I've lost my end for loop here. So I'm going to go back here and do spools. And then there's my end for right there. It was at the end of this curly brace. So that's where I want to put it here, is at the end of this curly brace. I think that's where I want it. Now one problem here is I need commas. So this is a comma here. And then I need to deal with this if not loop last thing. So that's where I put the comma in here like this. If not loop last, put a comma, indef. So if it's not the last loop, put a comma. But then, yeah, that belongs there. That's not the same curly brace. And that's the end of it. And then where? And then the end for here, but that's the for spool and spools. This is the last end for, which is right after the end if on the if not last loop. That's right. So this should give us a list of all of our spools now. Oh, we'll have to go back. We're going to go to index. We're going to save this. We're not actually returning any of this, so it will work as soon as we do that. So we want to look for something like this. I think we already have the time stuff. And that's this one right here. And yeah, we already have this stuff. So we do want to have the response made under client context. And this is going to be sidekicks, JSON. Timestamp is fine. This is sidekicks. Nope, nope, and nope. Just that. Now that should work. Expected in an indent block. I think it's okay now. Bam! Now we're going to take this right to here, and we're going to copy that. That's a control insert in this silly program. Okay, control insert, and then I'm going to go validate JSON. And shift paste and validate. Bam! So that's validate JSON. Alright, so good. Good. So now we have the list coming back. So we're done with this one. And we're almost done with this one. We just need to format the results. So we're going to take this here, and we're going to paste it in here, like this. And in this case, it's just the sidekick. And this is just the sidekick. And this is just the sidekick. And then we need a sidekick. One of the things that we need to do is go back, and I need to do like a not found spool 404 error. So here I have a 404 error for the settings. If you request a setting that doesn't exist, then I 404 it. But I haven't done that yet for spools, but I need to do that. So, and the same thing will need to be done for the sidekicks. All right, so we need to do a new file, and we need to call this sidekick.json. And we're going to save that. And then, nope. And then we're going to go in here. Actually, I'm going to look here. I think what I want to do is copy this spool one. I think that's easier. And then sidekick here. Yep. And I'm going to paste that in here. So the timestamp's the same. Oh, you know what I forgot in here is sidekicks. The request URL. So I'll fix that. Here. And that's just the URL that's being requested, which is /i here. And I think the same thing goes for this guy up here. All right, this is sidekick. And then this was created. Did I get that right in the other one? Yep. Okay. So name and created and the mood. Happy. Okay. And then so created needs to be set. We've got the timestamp, which is at the top. I guess it's the same timestamp. But it won't be each time. that I use the template. So created equals timestamp. Because in the case of creating it, the creation time is, this created time is the timestamp. These timestamps will be the same when this particular file is being used by this. Okie dokie. So we're setting the timestamp, we're setting sidekick. We could say sidekick.name. I'm okay doing the created and thing like this. I think that's fine. It's really just the name. Alright, let's run it and see what happens. It worked. Created is not working. Go back to index.py. It says created equals right there. Except I'm not passing it. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do this. I think it'd be better to do it like this. Because timestamp is outside the context of sidekick. But sidekick itself, it does have a timestamp. I just need to do this. I was just trying to avoid doing this whole thing, but that's fine. Put that here. Oops. Let's select this whole thing and put this like this. So now it's sidekick created string time. Yeah. Okay. So now let's run that. That should work. Okay, that's good. Homie Amethyst Dalmatian. Some interesting names. Let's see what our time looks like. Got like 4 minutes left. Looks like our viewer dropped off, which is fine. We were almost done. It was good we had viewers today, so thank you viewers. I appreciate you all very much. Okay, so we have the index done, the create index done, so that one's done. Now that's not actually creating an index, I might add. So we need to deal with that, separate issue. We're not going to get to that this episode, but and then we have return a list of sidekicks done. And then let's see here, we've got get a particular sidekick name. Well, that's going to also use this sidekick JSON file. So we need a handler for that. So that's pretty easy. So I'm going to do that right now. So I'm just going to copy this one. And this one's going to be called, I'm calling this one details, but that's not actually right because that's the one I'm going to do. So this is list. And then this one's going to be called details. And then it's going to take this like that. Then this is going to say name equals double quote. And then we're going to want to look up the sidekick. So we're going to go back to models and we're going to look here for an entry that says get by UID name. I'm going to copy this into the sidekick. Now that one has that method as well. Like that. So by user ID and name, we're getting it. Get by UID name. And then we're going to go back to index and we're going to call that get by UID name. Comma, name equals name. That's the name being passed in here. And then with client context, we're going to make a response using the sidekick JSON template, and we're going to use the sidekick. So that should be the details. So it's like get sidekick status. Alright, so this one is /I. This is our post. There's our get. So now we need to request homie amethyst Dalmatian. Not found. So I did /I homie amethyst Dalmatian. I mean, it should not. I mean, it shouldn't be handling a not found right now. So /I. Huh. Not found. Get I. I gotta make this a get. So I was looking for a post. There we go. So now we have that method done as well. So this one's done here. Now we'll need to do delete, and we'll need to be able to post to the sidekick name. So we will want to be able to do that, but that'll actually send a document to it. And then querying it is done with search, and then we want to be able to delete a document as well. So we have 2 more functions to do. So posting to the sidekick, well, actually technically deleting the sidekick, posting to the document to the sidekick, deleting the document from a sidekick. So those are the 3 we need to do. All right, that's it. I think the stream's over. I appreciate y'all joining in. This is Coding Mitta. I'm Cord Campbell. If you like it, give it a thumbs up. Click the subscribe button, click the notification bell. Gotten a few subscribers over the last couple of days, so that's kind of cool. People were just watching, so it's cool. And I appreciate you, Pseudo Soup, for coming in today. Pseudo Soup's my son, Connor, and he makes me very proud. And he's streaming as Pseudo Soup on Twitch. He plays video games though, so he's much more entertaining than I am coding any day at all. So very much appreciate for him being in here, and thank you for coming by, and be sure and sign up at